Hi, it's Amber. In this video, we will explain everything related to bubble charts. After this guide, you will be able to create effective charts in both PowerPoint and Excel. You can click on the section of the video you are interested in. Let's start by explaining what a bubble chart is. A bubble chart is an extension of a scatter plot with 3 instead of 2 variables. Each of the bubbles on the chart correspond with a single data point in your data. The variables' values for each of the bubbles are indicated by their vertical and horizontal position, as well as the size of the bubbles. A bubble chart only uses numeric variables. The added third data variable makes you able to compare 3 different pairwise comparisons, such as x and y. But you can also analyze the overall relationship of all 3 variables. If you wanted to show the same insights with a scatter plot, you would need multiple instead of one single bubble chart. As we can see on your screen, this bubble chart shows the relationship between median income and life expectancy as indicated by the axes. By adding a third variable, we can also display the percentage of college degrees in a country, which is indicated by the size of the bubbles. Let's look at some other examples. Here is another example of a similar bubble chart showing 3 key financial indicators. In this example, we compare the biggest American, Asian, and European banks, where the x-axis represent revenue, the y-axis represent the profit margin, and the size of the bubbles represent the company's market capitalization. Further, by using color, we can add a 4th variable that is categorical. Here it indicates the region of the banks. As we can see, JP Morgan's revenue, profit margin, and market cap is much larger than any other bank in the world. Further, American banks in general have a larger market cap, as seen by the bigger bubbles. European banks, on the other hand, have smaller profit margin, revenue, and market caps as indicated by the size of the bubbles and their position on the y and x axis. Another use of a bubble chart is a portfolio analysis like the world-famous Boston Matrix that compare the relative market share and market growth of a company's product lines. The model divides products into the 4 following quadrants. A dog has both low relative market share and market growth, where a cash cow, on the other hand, has high relative market share but low market growth. Further, a question mark have a low relative market share but high growth. Lastly, stars indicates both high relative market share and market growth. Using this framework, companies can determine opportunities and risks of their current market segments. In a bubble chart form, we can add revenue as a third variable, helping visualizing data more effective. As seen on the chart, iPhones are a cash cow and remain Apple's most dominant revenue stream, while wearables are a star as it has high market growth and Apple has relatively high market share. While the Boston Matrix is a useful tool for portfolio analysis, remember that other aspects may have to be taken into account. For example, although other products may be classified as a dog, there may be synergies which this chart don't highlight. Also, by using a bubble chart, it's clear just how vital iPhones are for the company's revenue. This won't be highlighted in a normal Boston Matrix. You can also put in other chart elements in a bubble chart like a return of sales relative market share band, which illustrates the expected profitability range given a company's relative market share. In the chart shown using car companies as an example, we can see that Mercedes-Benz and Toyota overperform on return of sales, as they are above the band. Ford, on the other hand, is below the band, as they underperform in regards to the expected return of sales at their relative market share. Remember, the x-axis should be logarithmic when using this kind of band as it emphasizes relative differences rather than absolute differences, which aligns with how relative market share is interpreted. In Ampler, you can simply toggle on in the band without calculating anything. You probably wonder, what do I do if the third variable has some negative values as an area can't be negative? Although bubble charts aren't ideal for displaying these negative values, it can still be done. In the following example with incorporating negative values, we show you how. Let's use an example of different companies' financial performance. The easiest way to indicate a negative third variable is by color, as seen on the screen. Remember, if the y values are negative, the data points move to the left of the vertical axis. But if it's the x values who are negative, they move below the horizontal axis. These lines on the chart help distinguish the positive y and x values from the negative ones. As seen on the chart, the relative market share change can be unrelated to a company's net profit and gross profit. Some reasons include intentionally sacrifice profitability for growth, or the sales is not increasing at the same rate as competitors. Nevertheless, if relative market share is declining, it should be cause of concern, or if rising, a sign of optimism. A scatter plot would highlight the correlation between gross profit and net profit more clearly, but it won't tell us if the company is actually gaining or losing relative market share. In our last example, we will look at a related chart type called a packed circle chart. This chart type also uses bubbles as data points, with the size indicating the magnitude of the chosen variable. Unlike a traditional bubble chart, this chart type doesn't have X or Y values. Rather, the circles are packed together either by being close or in a larger circle, which helps to avoid overlap. The example shown divide the US population by state indicated by the size of the bubbles and packed together with their associated region. Now I will show you how to make a traditional bubble chart using Ampler and without add-ins in both PowerPoint and Excel in that order. When determining if a bubble chart is suitable for your data, ensure you have 3 numeric variables, and your aim is to analyze patterns between them. Also, evaluate the dataset structure. If values are too closely associated, the chart may be difficult to interpret. If a third variable isn't needed in order to understand the main takeaway of the chart, then a scatter plot would be better. Now let's start creating a bubble chart. You can use PowerPoint's own native bubble chart tool, which we will show later in the video. For the main guide, we will use Ampler. To create a bubble chart with Ampler, simply plot it in the following way. Click on the Ampler ribbon. Click on Ampler Charts. Choose Bubble Chart and insert in PowerPoint. Let's scale the chart up a bit. To change the data, you have to do the following. Double-click on the chart to open the data table. With the chart open, plot in your data from Excel. Remember, you need 3 columns of numeric variables. Copy and paste it into the chart table. The chart will instantly adjust to fit the data. If you want to change a single data point, you can just click and change it. Remember, the bubble sizes are the 3rd data series called size in Ampler. After plotting in your data values, it's time to customize our chart. Make sure to rename the axes by changing the column headings. And rescale the axes to match the data values. If you want to add a 4th categorical variable, use the Group section in the data table. The bubbles will be colored according to their group association. Now it's time to finalize your chart. Make sure to add or tweak the following. Scale the chart so all the data points can be seen clearly. You can also move the axes titles around the chart. Then rescale the bubbles' area to make the chart more readable. Scale down the text labels if needed. Remember, you can move them around as well. Now that we have scaled the text labels and bubbles, right, click the chart to toggle on the size labels to add the bubble size value. Change the number format if needed by clicking on the label. You can also change the color and text size. add a legend to showcase the fourth variable, make sure to scale it up. Make the text labels bold for added readability. Add a title to clarify the context of the chart. You can make the text labels and title bold for added readability. Scale the axes down a bit to make the title more prominent. Don't forget the numbers. There you have it, a great bubble chart. If you just want to create a bubble chart in PowerPoint without an add-in, you have to do the following. Click on the Insert tab and choose Charts. Under X, Y, Scatter, choose Bubble, then a bubble chart will appear on the slide. Thereafter, enter the data values into the spreadsheet. The chart will then scale automatically. Now we just have to customize the chart. Make sure the axes are the right scale, if not click on Axis. Then the Format tab. Select Format Selection, then type in the minimum and maximum of the scale. Make sure also to do the same for the Y-axis. Click on the bubbles to scale them down. Then scale down the axes and change their color. Delete the current title. After that, toggle on Axis Titles. And write the title, color, and resize them. Let's make the axes labels bold. Finally, add the bubble size label by clicking the bubbles. Then add chart element and add data labels. Uncheck Y value and checkmark the size box. If you want to give a bubble a text label or group them by color, you will have to do it manually like this. Click on the bubble and select desired color. Then on the Insert tab, click on Text box and write the name. At last, add a line to show what bubble the name is associated with and make the text bold. After you have done this for all bubbles, the chart is finished. There you have it, a bubble chart in PowerPoint. While you can see the native charts in PowerPoint are sufficient, the visual flair is lacking and options for customization is limited. Now let's turn to Excel, where you can also build a bubble chart from the ground up. First make sure to have at least 3 numeric variables in order to generate the chart. The first column are X values and corresponding Y and Z values are listed in adjacent columns. Then select the data series. Be careful not to highlight row or column headers. Select the bubble chart under the Charts group in the Insert tab. After the chart have been inserted, scale it in order to make it more readable. To rescale the axes, go under Chart Design and select the More Axis options under the Add Chart Element section. Then you can type in your desired scale. Resize the bubbles by double-click on them and write the desired size. To add axis titles, select Add Chart Element under the Chart Design tab, and then choose Axis Titles to add a vertical and horizontal axis. Write the names of the X and Y axis. Also, don't forget the chart title. If you want a size label on the bubbles, do the following. Select More Data Labels options in the Data Label section under Chart Elements in the Chart Design tab. Oh, I forgot to make them center. Then under Label Options, unclick the Y value and click on Size. Change the text color in order to make the labels noticeable. To color the bubbles into the 4th categorical variable, highlight the group column and select Sort A to Z under the Data tab. Thereafter, click on the chart and select Data. Here you can create individual data series based on each region. Click on Add and make sure to add the X, Y, and Z or size values. Then the bubbles will be colored according to group. You can click on the bubbles if you want, change the color. Repeat this process I just showed for the rest of the groups. After we have grouped and recolored the bubbles, I will scale up the chart some more. If you want to name individual bubbles, you will have to do that manually. This can be done by inserting a text box. Also add a line to indicate the associated bubble. Make the name and size labels bold, repeat with every single bubble. And just like that, an Excel bubble chart. There are some best practices to remember when creating bubble charts. Ensure all three variables give meaningful insight and are numerical. Avoid overcrowding the chart with bubbles. If there are too many, make a scatter plot instead. Make sure to include the legend and axis labels to make the chart more interpretable, and label key data points directly if it amplifies interpretation. Display 0 or negative bubble size values carefully. Use color coding, labels, or alternative shapes. Remember to use appropriate scaling of the size of the bubbles by, for example, normalizing extreme ranges to avoid misleading representations. Like any other chart, there are some advantages and disadvantages of using a bubble chart. Let's start with when it's a good idea to use these charts. If you want to visualize more than two variables and you want to show correlations and/or clusters of data. They are also useful in order to highlight outliers on multiple dimensions. You should choose a different chart type if you have too many data points and if the bubbles have similar X and Y values, as the chart can get cluttered and hard to interpret. Also choose another chart type if the third variable is negative, as it can be difficult to visualize. Remember, data containing non-numeric variables isn't suitable. As discussed in the former section, in some cases it's better to opt for other charts, as bubble charts can become too cluttered with large data sets, or when you need to make precise comparisons between variables. Let's look at some examples. A scatter plot is a good option as it, like a bubble chart, show relationships between numeric variables. This chart type lacks a third variable, and you therefore have to split the chart up into multiple ones in order to showcase the same insights. An advantage, however, is that it's way more clear to see the relationship between the X and Y variables. Here, we can, for example, clearly see a linear relationship between median income and life expectancy, but be careful with this interpretation. Another great reason to opt for a scatter plot is the simple fact that you can plot way more data points. If we take the example from the bubble chart we made together, you can see that with more data points, it becomes clear that the relationship between median income and life expectancy isn't in fact linear. The inclusion of African nations highlights that median income isn't as correlated with life expectancy as first observed. Life expectancy rises exponentially with median income at first, but after an income of $12,000, it levels out. Remember, when deciding between a bubble chart or scatter plot, it's important to evaluate what you want to tell with your chart. If an additional variable doesn't enhance the audience's understanding of the main takeaway from the chart, it's better to leave it out and use a scatter plot rather than a bubble chart. And another great alternative is the clustered bar or column chart, especially if you want to compare variables directly. The X and Y variables can be very difficult to decipher from a bubble chart, whereas in a clustered bar or column chart, the values are clear. This chart also don't have an overlapping issue. If we look at the former example of market analysis of banks, it's much easier to compare profit margins and revenue directly than in the bubble chart. However, in our bubble chart version, it's more clear visually that JP Morgan is an outlier not only in market cap size, but on all variables. In conclusion, instead of using multiple scatter plots, a simple bubble chart can represent the same data in the same chart. This makes them ideal for analyzing relationships between multiple variables at once. Another strength is the chart highlights outliers at multiple dimensions. If the outliers are on the Y or X axis, it shows a data point's deviation from the relationship, and if data points deviate in the Z value, it illuminates a disproportionation in magnitude. Most significantly, a bubble chart can show extreme anomalies where a data point deviates on three variables. Like scatter plots, bubble charts also visualize clusters in data, making it easier to identify patterns that are hard to detect using other chart types. However, be aware of not having too many or too closely related data points, as this can clutter the chart too much and make insights hard to interpret. With Ampler, creating visually appealing charts has never been easier. Ampler also has many other chart options and features for PowerPoint, Excel, and Word. Visit our website in the link below the video to learn more. You can also download a free trial of Ampler there. Make sure to follow us on YouTube in order to get more educational videos to amplify your presentations. See you in the next one.